My fiancée, Sarah, and her mother, Patricia, spent 2 years systematically breaking down my self-esteem, convincing me I wasn't good enough for their family while secretly planning to replace me with Sarah's ex-boyfriend. They thought they were so clever, playing the long game of emotional manipulation. What they didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything, and their perfect little scheme was about to backfire spectacularly at what was supposed to be our engagement party. Hey viewers, welcome to the channel. We are just starting and your support means a lot. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. I never thought I'd be the type of person to write one of these posts, but here I am at 3 in the morning, still shaking from what happened tonight. My name is Dylan, I'm 28, and until 6 hours ago, I thought I was going to marry the woman of my dreams. Now I'm sitting in my apartment, surrounded by boxes of her stuff that I'm about to donate to charity, and I've never felt more free in my entire life. Let me start from the beginning, because this story doesn't make sense without context. I met Sarah Mitchell when she was 25 at a marketing conference in Denver. She was beautiful, successful, and seemed genuinely interested in my work as a software engineer. We hit it off immediately, and within 3 months we were inseparable. Everything felt perfect, almost too perfect, but I was so infatuated that I ignored the little red flags that started appearing. The first red flag was her mother, Patricia Mitchell, who's 53 and runs her own interior design business. From the moment I met her, I could tell she was sizing me up like a piece of furniture that didn't quite fit her vision. She'd make these subtle comments about my appearance, my career, my family background. Nothing overtly hostile, just enough to make me question whether I was good enough for her daughter. Sarah would always defend her mother afterward, saying things like, "Mom just wants the best for me," or "She's protective because Dad left when I was young." I understood that, or at least I thought I did. I wanted to be accepted by her family, so I tried harder. I dressed better, bought more expensive gifts, took Sarah on pricier dates, but it was never enough. The real manipulation started about 6 months into our relationship. Sarah began this pattern of building me up and then tearing me down. She'd tell me how much she loved me, how I was different from other guys, how she could see a future with me. Then, a few days later, she'd find fault with something I did or said. I was too clingy or not attentive enough. I was too ambitious or not driven enough. I was too social or too much of a homebody. At first, I thought this was normal relationship stuff. Everyone has disagreements, right? But Patricia would always somehow be involved in these conversations. She'd call right in the middle of our arguments or show up unexpectedly, and suddenly, Sarah would become this different person. Cold, critical, almost like she was performing for her mother's approval. The gaslighting was so subtle I didn't recognize it for what it was. Sarah would make plans with me, then claim I'd misunderstood or misremembered. She'd tell me she'd said things she never said, or deny conversations we definitely had. When I started writing things down to keep track, she found my notes and accused me of being obsessive and controlling. Patricia was even worse. She'd make these cutting remarks disguised as concern. "Marcus seems stressed lately, Sarah. Are you sure he's handling his job well?" Or, "I noticed Marcus has been putting on weight. You know how important it is to stay healthy in a relationship." She'd say these things right in front of me, then act surprised when I looked hurt. The worst part was how they tag-teamed me. Sarah would start an argument about something minor, like forgetting to pick up groceries, and somehow Patricia would show up within an hour. They'd both sit there, dissecting my behavior, my choices, my character. They'd compare me to Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Jake Morrison, who's 29 and works in finance. According to them, Jake was more successful, more attractive, more emotionally mature. The fact that he'd broken up with Sarah apparently didn't matter because, as Patricia loved to remind me, sometimes the best men need time to find themselves. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Rachel Kim, who's 42, about 8 months ago. She helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't normal relationship challenges. She used terms like emotional abuse and triangulation and scapegoating. She encouraged me to trust my instincts and to start documenting the incidents that made me feel crazy, so I started keeping a detailed journal. Not just notes, but actual recordings when I could manage it. Sarah and Patricia had gotten so comfortable with their little games that they'd stopped being careful about what they said around me. I recorded Patricia telling one of her friends that I was a placeholder until Sarah came to her senses about Jake. I recorded Sarah telling her cousin that she was only staying with me because I was safe and convenient. The most damning recording happened 3 weeks ago. Sarah thought I was in the shower, but I was actually in the bedroom when Patricia called. She put the phone on speaker, and I heard Patricia say, "The engagement party is the perfect opportunity. Jake will be there, and once everyone sees them together again, Dylan will get the message. We just need to humiliate him enough that he leaves on his own." Sarah laughed and said, "Mom, you're terrible, but you're probably right. I'm getting tired of pretending anyway. Jake texted me yesterday asking if I was really happy. I think he's ready to try again." That's when I realized they weren't just emotionally abusing me, they were planning to publicly humiliate me at our own engagement party. The party that I had helped plan and pay for. The party where all of our friends and family would be present to witness my humiliation. I could have confronted them then. I could have packed my things and left, but something inside me snapped, not in a violent way, but in a clarity way. I realized that if I just disappeared, they'd spin the story to make me look like the villain. They'd tell everyone I was unstable, that I couldn't handle commitment, that I'd abandoned poor Sarah. They'd probably have Jake consoling her within a week, and everyone would think it was a beautiful love story, so I decided to beat them at their own game. I spent the next 3 weeks preparing. I made copies of all my recordings and organized them chronologically. I wrote a detailed timeline of their manipulation tactics. I even hired a private investigator, Tom Bradley, who's 45 and used to be a police detective. He confirmed what I'd suspected. Sarah and Jake had been meeting regularly for months, always at places where they thought no one would see them. The engagement party was tonight at Patricia's house. She'd insisted on hosting it, claiming she wanted to give us the perfect send-off into marriage. About 50 people were there, my family, Sarah's extended family, our mutual friends, and some of Patricia's business associates. Jake was there too, of course, as Sarah's old friend. I watched them work their magic. Patricia kept making these passive-aggressive toasts about how some people grow into the love they deserve and how real connections can't be forced. Sarah was flirting with Jake right in front of me, then acting innocent when I looked uncomfortable. She'd touch his arm, laugh at his jokes, and when people noticed, she'd say things like, "Oh, Jake and I are just old friends." "Dylan doesn't mind, do you, honey?" The plan was becoming obvious. They were going to create a scene where I'd look jealous and controlling, then Sarah would dramatically realize that Jake was her true love, and I'd be the villain who couldn't handle her having male friends. It was actually pretty sophisticated in its cruelty, but I was ready. At 8 o'clock, I stood up and asked for everyone's attention. I thanked them for coming and said I had something important to share. Sarah looked nervous, probably thinking I was about to propose or make some grand romantic gesture that would ruin their plan. Instead, I pulled out my phone and said, "I want to share with you all the real story of my relationship with Sarah because I think you deserve to know the truth before you continue celebrating our engagement." I played the first recording, Patricia calling me a placeholder. Then the second one, Sarah admitting she was tired of pretending. Then the third one, them planning tonight's humiliation. The room got quieter and quieter as people realized what they were hearing. Sarah tried to interrupt, claiming the recordings were fake or taken out of context, but I kept playing them. Patricia tried to grab my phone, but my brother David, who's 31 and built like a linebacker, stepped between us. The final recording was the most damning. It was from last week when Sarah and Patricia were discussing how to maximize the drama tonight. Sarah said, "I want Dylan to look as pathetic as possible when I choose Jake. Maybe I'll even give him a speech about how Jake is everything he's not." The silence in the room was deafening. Jake looked mortified. Apparently, he hadn't realized he was part of an elaborate scheme to humiliate me. My family looked furious. Sarah's family looked shocked and embarrassed. Patricia's business associates were whispering among themselves. Then I delivered the speech I'd been practicing for weeks. I talked about emotional abuse, about gaslighting, about how love shouldn't require you to constantly prove your worth. I talked about how I'd spent 2 years trying to be good enough for people who had already decided I wasn't. I talked about how I'd almost let them convince me that I was the problem. Sarah tried to salvage the situation by claiming I was having a mental breakdown, that I was obsessed and controlling. But the recordings spoke for themselves. Patricia tried to play the victim, saying I'd violated their privacy and that recording people without consent was illegal. I calmly explained that in our state, only one party needs to consent to recording, and since I was part of all these conversations, everything I'd done was perfectly legal. The party ended with Sarah screaming at me, calling me every name in the book. Patricia was crying, saying I'd ruined her daughter's life. Jake actually came up to me and apologized, saying he'd had no idea they were using him to hurt me. He said he'd thought Sarah had genuinely moved on and was interested in rekindling their relationship naturally. My family rallied around me. My mom, Janet, who's 55 and usually avoids conflict, told Patricia that she'd never seen such cruel behavior in her life. My dad, Robert, who's 58 and rarely shows emotion, hugged me and said he was proud of me for standing up for myself. I left the party with my head held high, knowing that I'd never have to pretend to be someone I wasn't again. I'd never have to walk on eggshells, never have to second-guess my own memories, never have to accept being treated as less than worthy of love and respect. The best part. 3 hours after I got home, I received a text from Sarah's cousin Amy, who's 26 and has always been kind to me. She said, "I always knew something was off about how they treated you. Half the family is furious with Sarah and Patricia right now. You did the right thing, Dylan. I'm sorry it took so long for someone to see what they were doing to you." I also got a message from Jake, who said he was blocking Sarah's number and wanted nothing to do with their drama. Apparently, he'd been genuinely hurt when she'd broken up with him 2 years ago, and he'd been hoping they could try again. Finding out he was just a pawn in their game to humiliate me had disgusted him. As I sit here now, surrounded by Sarah's things that I'm donating tomorrow, I feel lighter than I have in years. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt. I'm just grateful that I found the strength to expose their cruelty before I made the biggest mistake of my life. Dr. Kim always told me that the best revenge against people who try to make you feel small is to refuse to stay small. Tonight, I refuse to be their victim. I refuse to be humiliated. I refuse to disappear quietly so they could rewrite history. Instead, I made sure that everyone who matters knows exactly who Sarah and Patricia really are. I made sure that their reputation for kindness and class is now permanently tainted by the truth of their cruelty. I made sure that Jake knows he was being used, and that my family knows why I was so miserable for the past 2 years. Most importantly, I made sure that I'll never again accept being treated as less than worthy of genuine love and respect. I'm 28 years old, and I'm finally free to find someone who will appreciate me for who I am, not try to change me into someone I'm not. The engagement is obviously off. The wedding is canceled. The relationship is over. And for the first time in 2 years, I'm genuinely happy about my future. Tomorrow, I'm having lunch with my therapist to process everything that happened tonight. Next week, I'm planning to visit my college roommate in Portland, who's been telling me for months that I seem different, sadder, not like myself. I'm going to reconnect with friends I'd lost touch with because Sarah and Patricia had convinced me they were bad influences. I'm going to remember who I was before I met Sarah. I'm going to rebuild my confidence, my self-worth, my joy. I'm going to stop apologizing for taking up space in the world, and someday, when I'm ready, I'm going to find someone who thinks I'm more than enough just as I am. Someone who doesn't need their mother's approval to love me. Someone who doesn't keep me around as a placeholder while they figure out what they really want. But for now, I'm just grateful to be free. Free from the constant criticism, the gaslighting, the feeling that I was never quite good enough. Free from walking on eggshells, from second-guessing every word I said, from accepting crumbs of affection like they were grand gestures. Sarah and Patricia thought they were so clever, playing their long game of emotional manipulation. They thought they had me figured out, that I was weak and desperate enough to accept any treatment as long as they kept me around. They were wrong, and now everyone knows it.